Hey everyone, this is the Best of Guatemala. You're about ready to take a deep dive and learn everything we learned in the 2 days we were in Guatemala learning about sustainable forestry. So enjoy.
Hey, Bob Taylor here, and I'm in Guatemala, and frankly, I'm just blown away at this Isabel agroforestry project. I really am. This is 4 decades of a family being dedicated to growing a real natural forest that had once been a forest and been completely denuded to make agricultural land, cattle. What they've done is they've been very sensitive and they've been smart. They've learned by mistakes and they've brought things in that want to live here, and they haven't forced things that don't want to live. I'm standing here by just a trial. This is, when you look down this, it's a corridor of mahogany trees. Out in this forest all around here that you're seeing footage of is mahogany, rosewood, zebra wood. There are people in the world that are doing unbelievable work, and I'm blown away. This is the first stop of 25 days of seeing incredible things, and I'm really blown away. It gives me inspiration for the things that I'm doing. Why? Because when I see that you can do it, I know that I can do it. Fantastic. I can't wait to show you more. So you've been here before. Tell me about it.
Yeah, in the late 80s, I was backpacking through Central America, and just a few miles up the river, there's an orphanage, Casa Guatemala, and I was a volunteer at the Casa Guatemala in the late 80s. And at that time, everything we've seen today was a cow field. Everything we've seen today started after I left. So in that short blink of an eye of my lifetime, this emerged from a cow field to everything that we've seen today.
Isn't it incredible that somebody would do this?
It's mind-blowing that somebody not just could do this, but did do this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a testament.
Unbelievable. Here with Juan Bronson, he's been showing me around his plantation. It's unbelievable, Juan, but we're looking at Dalbergia Stevensoni, which we call Honduras rosewood. Yeah. Tell us about this.
So this essentially was a project that sort of started as an ethnobotanical experiment, right? As an archaeologist, and in the national parks we found some seed, started experimenting with it, and found that it grew faster than people assumed. You talk to people about rosewood and they're like, it's going to take 50, 80, 100 years. But it's not true, especially if you manage it and stimulate the growth vertically, you get some pretty good growth. These trees are 22, 23 years old. Fantastic. They don't grow as fast as, say, a teak or a mahogany, but it's not as slow as what we previously thought. So this plantation here is one of the first plantations, probably in Central America, where we do it at a medium scale, a sort of more of a commercial scale, and feel like we can prove that, you know, if you assume a 30-year rotation or something like that, that you're going to have a decent amount of wood.
Fantastic. Now, it's, you know, I look here, I see a bunch of trees, don't know how big it is, but take a guess at how many trees you have planted.
We have the rosewood species, we have probably 12,000.
12,000 trees. Yeah. Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, they're in different sections.
Yeah.
But over there we have probably 3 hectares. This is 1.5. We have another 2 over there in different areas, between 10 and 12,000.
Wow. But this is what I've been talking about. Without planting, there's no sustainability, right? This is the only true sustainable model, is to plant, in my opinion. How do you feel? Yeah,
oh, absolutely. Really, the only sustainable source of tropical hardwoods in particular is through the plantation.
Everything else is managing the decline.
Otherwise, you're going into a forest, and maybe the concessions actually do pretty good work. They'll go in there and they'll do some selective logging. But regardless, you're entering a place that was in a natural state and actually opening corridors for people that are behind you. Yeah. So even though the concessions are doing things well, it's the follow-up after the concessions, the long-term effect that can have some effect. Also, we're losing our genetic sources when they go out and select and cut down, as people will do, cut down the biggest trees.
The big best goes first, and
so we lose that seed source, and it's really a tragedy. So that's another thing we're trying to do here is find the best seed sources and germinate them and plant them and keep them on the property.
People think about a plantation, or this is agroforestry is what it is, and you can call it plantation, you can call it a forest that we're building, but the fact is you get birds, animals. This is a real viable forest. For people who don't know, they take a word, they associate it with something, but you've got incredible wildlife coming in here.
Well, our model is all about reforesting areas that were deforested. Right. So, this was all pasture land at one point, and so reforesting pasture land. But anything that's natural forest, obviously you don't want to cut down the natural forest and then plant something else.
No.
Because you kill the sustainability factor.
But there's already been hundreds of thousands, millions of acres of that already done. So you put it back together.
No, and there are tangible economic reasons to do that. Like right now we use forests as buffer zones. Because inevitably in agriculture, either you're going to get some kind of human problem, you're going to get a disease problem or a fire. If you can protect those areas with natural buffer systems that contain wildlife and biodiversity and all that, over the long term, you're going to reduce your risk.
Absolutely.
And so there's actually like real good reasons to preserve forests. And also everything that's along a waterway will keep forested in a natural state.
Now what I think is worth mentioning is this isn't a small operation. How many hectares do you have in total?
Right now under management we have about 550 hectares.
Yeah, more than 1,000 acres? 1,100 acres?
1,200 acres.
1,200 acres. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's all using this polyculture system. So there are certain instances like this where we'll do rosewood in clusters. You know?
Sure.
But you'll never see, 500 acres of the same thing.
Sure. Yeah. I just did a little video a minute ago where there's some trials of mahoganies, and they just look almost park-like. And I explained to them that this is where you're doing trials and you're planting them in an orderly fashion. Exactly. But here's more natural.
Actually, most of the plantation's that way, so we'll see that. Okay. So we'll see the rows are all spaced at a very specific spacing, 3x3 spacing. And a lot of that helps because you're stimulating vertical growth. They're like looking for sunlight. If you're talking about mahogany, it makes it easier to control the hypsophila if it's all in one cluster.
I see.
So if we planted like one mahogany here, one rosewood there, one ormigo there, then the management of that particular species would be a lot more. It'd be better for biodiversity. So what we've done now is we're doing it in clusters. So we'll do
biodiversity across your acreage.
And then surrounded by natural forest.
Yeah. Perfect. Incredible.
Right now, since most of the open pasture lands have been reforested, we want to take advantage of that sub-canopy space and plant it with shade crops. And the shade crop that makes the most sense for the region culturally and because of the adapted to the climate is cacao.
Okay.
Cacao is, a lot of people will say it's from this region. It's actually not. It was traded up from the Amazons, but it was traded up 5,000 years ago. So what we have in this region is cacao that has been selected by the Mayans over millennia. And that's why Central American cacao has a good reputation. This particular forest here, we do selective thinning. Most of the trees were planted between 96 and 98. 90% of the trees here that you'll see here from there. So we're doing thinnings. We mill them here. It's a small bandsaw. That's a bandsaw. And most of that is sold local market. And most of that is sold in Antigua, in the colonial city. Occasionally in the city as well. We've exported a bit, but we actually did some math and taking out all the bureaucratic levels of pain and all that. For the scale that we sell at, it's easier for us to sell locally, and the margin is not that different. I think important about this is all plantation grown, and in my opinion, the only really sustain's source of wood in the long term.
Yes.
Right. Agreed.
Yes.
So
if you don't plant it, it's not sustainable.
So yeah. So there's things like this where you can't quite emulate without massive amounts of time and weight and pressure. But we've made some really beautiful furniture out of this stuff, and I would say it's almost comparable in some cases. And we're definitely out of the mahogany. We're getting like boards that are 100% hardwood, and this monkey pod goes extremely well too. I like that quite a bit.
Yeah.
This is the only one here that's not plantation. So I was mentioning to you guys, my grandfather used these as fence posts.
Yeah.
So we had a few logs lying around, and this was one of them.
Look at that, Vito.
But this is the same genetics that we're planting. This is Delbergia Stevensoni.
Stevenson.
We have Delbergia retusa, and we have a little Delbergia negra. That actually Chris
Yeah,
got
negra,
me the negra. Yeah. Teak, or teak. You can see these are all teak boards up here. Those. So we have a really good hardwood ratio. This is Ormigo. You guys made us a guitar out of this stuff. It turned out beautifully.
Yeah.
In this, they make a lot of marimba, so it's traditionally used as an instrument.
Yeah.
So it's a very nice tone wood, but I don't think it's been used extensively as a, internationally as a tone wood.
Nice.
So in the Mayan sacred book, the Popol Vuh, which is derived from an oral history of the Mayan people of this region, there are creation stories, there are stories about how humans came to be. And in that book, they talk about 5 sacred foods. And those sacred foods are maize, beans, cacao, squash, and a 5th one. And the 5th one was essentially forgotten and not used anymore. And it's related to the cacao family. And for some reason, it left the Mayan diet. We, a few years ago, doing research with a particular company, came across these trees in some Mayan gardens in the highlands of Guatemala. And we looked into it and we realized that it is this type of cacao that's no longer used. This is called Theobroma bicolor is the scientific name, the local name is patashte. It's not produced commercially at all, but we're interested in it because it can be used as like not a substitute, but a different kind of chocolate. So we actually have some bars, some of the first bars that have ever been made from it over here. We'll try some, but we like it a lot because it's a tree that is culturally adequate, that was quite rare. We've planted probably 1,000 of them over the last 2 years, and yeah, and that's something that sort of has a relationship that goes back a long time.
Are you aware of anyone else cultivating it?
No, there's like I said, these gardens, these Mayan gardens of these very traditional areas where they'll have 1 or 2 trees, but at a large scale, nobody is doing it.
So was this the 5th, do you believe?
Yeah, this is
this it. Yeah.
So 2 of the 5 were cacao.
Yeah.
How's the fruit?
It looks like an alien egg.
Yeah.
It's so bizarre.
An egg from outer space.
Ormigo too. Woodpecker. So this is the dry season now. So we want to plant in July and August. In June it'll start raining, but as I was saying, this entire property was all pasture land. There was cattle here 20 years ago over this whole area. This farm in particular is sort of our experimental garden. So we planted a lot of different things, mostly in small clusters, and then based on that experience, we applied that to a more sort of methodical system in some of the other plantations. So we'll go to another plantations where you'll see an application, like a commercial application. But as I said a couple of times, the first thing we deal with are the soils here. We eliminate the exotic grasses that are used for cattle pasture. And then once they're eliminated, we plant these leguminous cover crop species. This is related to tropical kudzu. It's Quercetia fasciloides. And it's a very efficient nitrogen fixer. So this one doesn't have many nodules, but the root systems have these little spheres in them. And these are the capsules that hold the nitrogen. So it's a natural nitrogen fixer. It's also valuable to us because it creates a lot of organic material. Especially when it's out in the sun, it'll get this big. And also erosion control. The other very important reason is that in tropical forestry, I'm sure you guys have visited some plantations, a huge part of the budget is allocated to brush control, weed control. With this kind of ground cover, we only plate around the trees. So the area that you're doing brush control in is probably 20% of what it would be in a natural forest plantation. We use different species. We use maní forajero, we use this stuff, there's a few others. But most of them are perennial. What we like about this is that you establish it and it's pretty good, much good to go for a long time. So that helps us in our economies. Behind me is a tropical mahogany, tropical cedars. These over here that kind of bifurcate all over the place are monkey pods. They grow really well, but you can see there's a lot of bifurcation. In lowland in areas that are prone to high humidity, you grow Santa Maria and rosewoods and things like that. And once the trees are established and it's giving you enough shade, you can plant your cacao. Cacao normally takes about 40% shade. Some people believe a little bit less, but most of our cacao is grown at around 55%, and that's part of the sustainability story here. So this area here is about right. This is a little over 50% shade, and the cacao is productive and it grows well, and it's not affecting the forestry aspect of this project. Like I said, we conducted a study with the American Bird Conservancy, and this type of forest where there are a lot of trees and different species with cacao, in some instances had more bird life than natural forest. And a lot of that has to do is because we have more fruit. And so especially woodpeckers and a few other species. Like we have tons of, when the mahogany is seeding, this has thousands of parrots in it. So we feel like that's kind of an important aspect of this whole thing. But we're also incorporating biochar. So biochar, especially in areas that are prone to drought, it's very interesting. Because first of all, it aerates the soil, which is good for like microbial life and for worms and things like that. But also what we found is if you look at charcoal under a microscope, it's very porous. Mm-hmm. And so if you treat it with something that's nitrogen dense or even worm tea, which we collect down there, it's the liquid that falls out, it'll fill those capsules with that liquid and release it slowly over time. So it kind of keeps moisture and humidity in the soil much longer than just dirt or this thing. So now we have a mixture that incorporates that carbon as well into our potting soil, which we're pretty
And this was a technique that the native populations in what's now Brazil were using basically to cultivate the Amazon.
Really?
I don't know if you read the Lost City of Z. Yeah. Very interesting how they've discovered now that what they thought was virgin rainforest for forever was actually a highly populated area, and that they had raised agricultural beds using biochar.
Yeah, they were finding really high incidence of charcoal.
And so the humans basically were able to transform the natural environment to be more fertile than it would be otherwise because of the heavy leaching. So we're sort of replicating that on a different scale.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is that everybody here is producing charcoal. Right, like everybody uses firewood, for better or for worse. You know, we're also limbing trees, so we have a lot of material. You saw all the bark over there. So we have a lot of sources of charcoal without burning down natural forest, which is an important thing.
Here's what happens when you commit yourself to a long-term project, a long-term study. This is not something that anybody would be able to correlate by cutting down trees in a forest. But because of the length that they've been doing this over decades, they've discovered we have two types of seeds. We have light-colored seeds, dark-colored. Together, kind of hard to tell the difference. I throw them in a separate pile. Look at the difference. One is light red, one is dark brown. This is going to produce dark wood. This is going to produce light wood. It's an amazing thing to find out. And I think timber-wise we owe a huge debt just to that discovery right there. It's unbelievable. As we think about growing wood for the future, you want to, for timber use, you want to be able to grow the right piece of wood. Man, my hat's off to this.
Yeah, it's part of the selective breeding program. I mean, we're looking for trees that are low mortality, high growth, nice bole. Or fake it, fake it.
He remembers. It's too many years to remember.
Zebra wood. Very slow growing.
There's some variability, more than other species, but we still feel like it's viable as a plantation species. It's obviously a longer rotation than some of the other commercial species we're looking at, but the value and the rarity and the value just in terms of biodiversity make it well worthwhile. And like I said, like for us, even just finding seed of this stuff, because all the big trees have been cut down, is a challenge. We went at one point a few years without finding any seed. Luckily now we found a farm that has some older trees that are seeding, and so now we have.
Is this Stephen Sonai?
Yes, yeah. But I've never seen a rosewood plantation that looks anywhere even close to it.
It's nice. Yeah.
It's usually like, oh, I had 5 trees and 3 of them died, and
yeah.
Well, it was the keynote of the wood for my guitars for many years.
Oh, really?
But now it's an appendix 1 inside this number 1. So that means it is the same protection that the ivory.